Welcome to episode 18 of the M3 Bearcast. In this episode, I'll be talking about different relationship styles. People who are friends with benefits, committed monogamous relationships, and those who practice ethical non-monogamy, also known as open relationships. I've had many discussions about relationships. It's one of my favorite topics. One of the major reasons for this is that a lot of people go through relationships on feeling alone. They use their intuition, their empathy to feel out what is right and wrong for them in their relationships. For me, I find it's much better to have some clear ideas about what you want. I have a section that I'm going to get into in just a moment about the sorts of questions you should be asking before you get into a sexual relationship with someone. Talking about monogamous long-term relationships, how do you keep the spark alive? How do you maintain mystery and wonder and sexual desire over decades? And what are some of the problems that people ignore about open relationships because they believe that it resolves one of the major issues of long-term relationships, that of being faithful to your partner? But there are many problems that, if you're aware of them, you can bypass and have a ethically non-monogamous relationship. But I think before we talk about going into those relationships, we should talk about just having sex with people in those relationships, or just having sex in general, having sex outside the confines of a relationship. And what does that mean? And what sort of agreements do you need to make with the person that you're having sex with? So there was this TikTok video that, I found very interesting. It was a very short 10 questions that you would have to ask yourself before having sex. And the author of the video clearly stated that these are not the only questions you should ask. That it was from the confines of the fact that it's a TikTok video, and just for conventional reasons, he chose 10 questions. They're not necessarily the top 10 questions, but they touch on a wide variety of things you should ask yourself before having sex. And I think these are all interesting, and I think I'll go through them one by one. But I guess first, maybe I should just read them. So 1, do you enthusiastically want to have it? 2, can you trust yourself to make a clear decision, or are you clouded by drugs or brokenhearted loneliness? 3, does it feel like the person would respect your boundaries, and do they know what your boundaries are? 4, does this person make you feel weird or unsafe? 5, are you prepared to possibly navigate complicated feelings? 6, would the hookup negatively affect anyone else outside of you and the person you're having sex with? 7, are you willing to risk bad or clumsy sex with this person? 8, how will doing it with this person change your expectations of your relationship with them? 9, do you know what brings pleasure to your body in this situation? And 10, do you think that this person has the skills to bring pleasure to your body? So I think a lot of the questions here talk about consent, the complicated feelings that can come up when you have sex with someone, navigating boundaries. And I really enjoyed the fact that he also included pleasure, because one of the major issues people forget to talk about sex is actually navigating, is it good? Especially when you talk about sex education. But anyway, so let's go through these one by one. Do you enthusiastically want to have it? So I think this is one of those questions that can come up in unconventional relationships in which, say, for instance, one partner has arranged a three-way with a third. I've heard of many open relationships where that was the agreement that they had come to terms with. And one of the partners is going along with their partner's selection of a third. And while they're there and they're enjoying it, I wouldn't necessarily say they were enthusiastic about it. I think every sexual encounter that you enter into, should not just be something that you're willing to do, but something that you are looking forward to doing. Like you really, like you said, enthusiastically engage in the sex with this person rather than just grudgingly going along with it. Of course, those can get very complicated, especially with I've heard the possibility of someone saying, like, if I don't agree to this, he's just going to have sex without me, or I feel like I'm going to be letting him down, or it's going to cause more problems than it's worth, so I will grudgingly go along with the sex. I think that's problematic, to say the least. The second one is, can you trust yourself to make a clear decision, or are you clouded by drugs or brokenhearted loneliness? So this has to do also with consent. The first was enthusiastic consent. This one is, are you under the influence of drugs or negative emotions that cloud your judgment? This is one that's very important. Oftentimes we can feel, I guess, a servant to our desires, that when the encounter is over, you could be scarred or feeling worse than before you went in. So a very important topic to consider. If you are outside the regular realms of loneliness, I would say like regular loneliness is fine. But if you feel like your emotional state is so compromised, it's worth waiting to having sex. There are other forms of intimacy that can make you feel or overcome some of those feelings of loneliness before you engage in actual sex. And number 3, do you feel this person will respect your boundaries, and do they know what they are? I think that's a great one, because do they know what they are is a good one. I think a lot of people have boundaries, but they don't know how to express them dealing with sex. So let's just say one of your boundaries is you don't want anyone touching your anus. Maybe you're total top, and the very act of someone touching your sphincter is going to scar you in some way. You should be able to say so. If someone, or maybe even maybe a bottom who doesn't want anyone touching their penis at all, can you communicate that to your partner? And are they going to respect those boundaries is the question, because both of those, I should say, are boundaries that I find weird. I'll just be honest. I think we should be open enough to, let people touch all our sexual parts, but that's not my call to say for someone else. If your boundary is to say, don't touch this, have you communicated it clearly? And do you think the person respects you enough to follow those boundaries, even if they disagree with them? Because like I was saying, in my case, those boundaries seem unusually strict in my eyes, but that is not my body. So I don't get to make that call. And so in that case, I would definitely respect the person if they let me know that's what they felt. Number 4, does the person make you feel weird or unsafe? I like the fact that they included the word weird, because I think a lot of times people are not willing to say they're afraid of someone. Fear gets downgraded to weird, uneasy. If it goes a little bit beyond nervousness to uneasiness, strangeness, like something is off about them in the situation. If someone uses language that makes you feel like that's not the language a person would use, a human person would use in this situation, like they're playing games, or they could possibly be dangerous, or that you're just a trophy to them when you really are there for the enjoyment. Listen to those instincts. Absolutely. If there's a fear or weirdness, don't do anything that puts you in a compromising position. Number 5, are you prepared to possibly navigate complicated feelings? Major one. This is one we were talking about with open relationships, and even with fuck buddy, pound pal, friends with benefits scenarios. If you have this idea that after you have sex, you're going to feel the same way that you do before you have sex, you are deluding yourself. Because if the sex was good, and let's hope it's good sex, one of you is going to feel differently when you get out of bed. Sex can be a transcendent experience. If you haven't been touched in a certain way in a long time, it can literally transform your identity in a way for a short period of time afterward. You could come out of a deep sadness or loneliness that will make you want to attach to that person. And before you get involved with someone sexually, you should know that. You should know that sex has the power to change your emotional landscape. And don't go in blind about that. Yeah, of course you can't know that that's going to happen, but I think what they say, are you prepared to possibly navigate complicated feelings with that person? I think you should really think, are you emotionally well enough to deal if those feelings come up? Number 6, would the hookup negatively affect anyone outside of you and the person you're having sex with? So in the case of open relationships, it's pretty common to say that if two people are in an open relationship, oftentimes one person is going to be getting a lot more sex than the other. And it can complicate things when one person may feel jealous that their partner is having way more sex outside of their relationship than with them. That could be one example. Or that the feelings may occur, even though they have decided they're not going to leave their partner, that may come up because the sex with this person was so great. They're attracted to them so great. They have that sort of new relationship energy, even though they're committed to their partner. They have a new sexual relationship with someone else and they're excited. And that excitement can cause feelings of jealousy and so forth. So I think this one is hard to really know unless you talk about it with the partner who has a partner. If you're getting into a sexual relationship with someone who has a permanent partner, you really do need to suss out how their partner responds to them having sex outside the relationship, what their level of disclosure is. Have they had any feelings of jealousy in the past? I mean, that's maybe one indication. Why is your relationship open? I don't know if they will want you interacting with their partner, but it'd be great if you could ask them questions about this and, make your intentions clear to make sure that their partner feels comfortable, that your intentions are not to try to interfere with their established relationship. So I think that's a very good question. Number 7, are you willing to risk having bad or clumsy sex with this person? So I think this one has to do, in my mind, I think this question is very relevant to, say, friendships, like actual friendships you might have with someone. And I've had sex with friends. And in our case, I think we were definitely willing to have bad, clumsy sex if that was going to happen. In fact, it was something that I think brought us closer as friends. But I think there could be scenarios in which bad or clumsy sex could actually damage your platonic friendship. And you have to be clear about that. Is bad sex going to be something that makes you think less of someone or interferes with your established friendship? I mean, I think things like that could happen. I think some of the benefits of having sex with someone you're friends with is that you can be willing to have that sort of bad sex, but I can see the opposite happening as well. So just be aware, like, not every sexual encounter goes well. And are you capable of having that conversation with that person afterwards? Number 8, how will doing it with this person change your expectations of your relationships with them? And I think that also goes back to friends having sex, or even friends with benefits, or dating relationships. So many scenarios in which, sex changes people's expectations. I think a lot of times, because it may change our emotional landscape. I can give you an example from my own life, which is if you've been having dates with someone for an extended period of time, let's say 2 or 3 months, and all those dates have been sexless, the moments you have sex with them the first time, I think it changes the expectation of your future dates. At this point, you've popped the cherry of your sex in relationships. So going back to just dating becomes a little more problematic. Now I've done it, but I remember having the sex. It was good, but I kind of wanted to get to know them better. And so I just found it harder to have actual regular dates outside of just hooking up after we got sex. And that was okay. I mean, because the sex was great. I just had to find a way to fit in a conversation between the sheets. And that does work. Number 9. Do you know what will bring pleasure to your body in this situation? I think a lot of times, especially with someone who is versatile, you might have to ask yourself which position you want to take. Do you want to be more dominant or submissive in this situation? Are you doing both? How do your bodies align? Because I think sex with different people have sex differently. So I don't think you can have a one-size-fits-all solution to how you approach sex. I think it's best to approach sex on an individual basis and determine if this person is right for the things that you want to do, the things that you want to have done to you. And that also feeds into the last question was, do you think this person, number 10, do you think this person has the skills to pleasure your body? And I think that kind of goes into like, if you want to get pounded out, is that the thing that this guy does? Does he like to just, pound ass the whole night? Is he able to do that? Or reversely, does this person have the skills to take some dick? I know someone who loved to just get oral all night. Like some people just like, you get like 10 minutes. You're not getting just service forever and ever. That is a thing that you probably want to negotiate with someone before you get into the bedroom. Okay, so this is, I would say, a good opening salvo into having a dialogue about healthy sexual boundaries, right? About entering into commitments, entering into situations with both eyes open. And I believe there's plenty more questions that might come up from the perspective of open relationships and friends with benefits, casual type sexual relationships that would definitely be applicable to this discussion. I would love to know if you have any additional questions that you would add to this list. You can find me on all of social media across the board at Male Media Mind. That's on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. Feel free to instant message me on any of those platforms. Pertaining to this, you can just say M3 Bearcast episode 18. I have additional questions that I would add to this list. But I think this list covers a lot of different relationship styles, like open relationships, friends with benefits, dating relationships, or even hookups. It is important to be mindful about the power of sex, the way that it has the ability to create emotional expectations or change relationships, or even put you in danger. So all of those things are very important. But in the next 2 segments after this short break, I'm going to talk about some of the issues that occur in long-term relationships, that of waning intimacy or eroticism in a very closed, tight-knit, safe, familiar relationship. We're going to be discussing an article from Esther Perel and getting into how to improve intimacy in closed relationships. And then I'm going to discuss open relationships, because a lot of times people will say, well, the solution to those intimacy issues in a closed relationship is to open it up. But of course, how about the reality of some of the issues that occur when relationships are opened? I think both are valid relationship styles. I hate it when people get into arguments about which is better, which one is more natural, which one is better. It really is just up to you and your partner. But the fact is, you can do both types of relationships wrong. And we're going to talk about how to get them right in the next couple of segments. See you after the break. Thank you for listening thus far. And if you're enjoying this conversation, please join us for our live streams on YouTube and Facebook every Wednesday at 6 p.m. Eastern, and every Saturday at 6 p.m. Eastern, where we discuss a host of different issues. I like talking about relationships and such. Greg, he hosts one on Saturday. It's often about politics. We go back and forth. We often have a lot of discussion with our audience, and it goes wherever it goes, and we have a good time. So subscribe to us on YouTube or like us on Facebook. Make sure to turn on notifications and you'll be notified each time we go live. Just search for Male Media Mind on any of these platforms. All right, now back to our conversation. So I am talking about Esther Perel's Mating in Captivity. And the reason this came up was that there was an article that I presented to the members of the panel for the M3 Live broadcast that was 4 times that you are closest to your long-term partner. And as I was reading the list, it was pretty obvious that this had to do with her book, Mating in Captivity. So I gave it a read, and it is very, very good. I love her show, Where Do We Begin? And she counsels couples who are going through relationship issues. She's just amazing at her job. And her analysis of the end of sex in committed relationships is spot on. And the basis of the book is that in the pursuit of safety of a long-term monogamous relationship, we somewhat smother desire. And that security from that relationship is somewhat ephemeral anyway, since you cannot stop, say, something like death or accidents or just the vicissitudes of life can end a relationship. And therefore that sense of security is ephemeral to begin with. But the sense of security is what kills eroticism. And her reasoning behind this is that eroticism has at its core a seed of mystery and danger. And once you have a partner who is secure and safe, that eroticism can fade. You're just no longer turned on by the person who you help maintain a household with. The title of her book, Mating in Captivity, just talks about how domesticity can kill eroticism in a relationship and how you can get it back. So I love the article because it talks about 4 states in which we can find a renewed sense of distance with our partner while still maintaining safety in a relationship. Because I know for a lot of people, you could say, well, why not just open up the relationship? You can have sex outside of it. But this isn't something that everyone is ready to do. And so I like the fact that you can find some distance from your partner and maybe rekindle that eroticism with them. So the 4 things that she had in her article that increased closeness of long-term partners were times when you see them in their element, times when your partner is actually away for a long time and you reunite, times when your partner surprises you, and times when you see your partner through the eyes of another. So the first one, when your partner is in their element. This could be if your partner is a performer, an artist, or a speaker, and seeing them give a speech. Basically, we are different people given different environments. So if you see your partner in an environment in which they excel, if you can find a setting that your partner is proficient in and can show their expertise, you can see them in a new light, in a way that you haven't seen them in their day-to-day life. And what this does, it is a new side of them, which can rekindle that feeling of mystery and danger. Because even then you can see that there's aspects of your partner that you do not have complete control of. That while they're with you, they never show this side of themselves. It is something that is for the world and not just for you. And also, there are changes in people's personality when they get into a flow state. So there was this book about flow states. Is when you are singularly focused in on an activity because it is at the edge of difficulty and fun. It is a state in which people can perform at a peak performance. And also people describe it as time passing by quickly, like you sort of block out the world in a way. And so this could be just one of those things where the two of you can cam. Now, this is something I've done with somebody. I find it pretty attractive to see the person I'm dating working, and you can get maybe a tour of their job and see them working or whatever. And maybe one day when they are doing their job or whatever, you can just sit there on cam and watch them do their thing. And I did that one time, and it turned me on so much that he closed his office and we had a bait session right there on cam. There's something hot about someone, to me, getting out of their work clothes too, like when they're at their job. So yeah, change the location that you view your partner in, change the situation that you envision them in, and you can reimagine who they are, and it can give you a renewed sense of intimacy. The second thing they said is obviously absence makes the heart grow fonder. When you reunite with your partner after a time, you can rekindle that passion that you had when you first met. And the reasons that this happened are manyfold. So first of all, obviously just reuniting with someone you hadn't seen in a while is just a great feeling. But also in the time that your partner is away, you have the opportunity to imagine them in the idealized way that you felt when you first met them. You know how that is, where, your fantasies about your partner are somewhat killed by your day-to-day interactions with them. If you see them as sexy, it's really hard to see them as sexy when they're also doing the laundry and they kind of stink and they haven't showered. Each of those little interactions somewhat kills your idealized image of your partner. The distance can create a situation in which you can reimagine those idealized forms of your partner again, and it can begin to rev up your libido. And once you reunite, you can share some of those fantasies and rekindle those passions. And it's a tried and true cliche, because it's true, and it's a really simple thing. One of the things that they mentioned in the article was that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to go on separate vacations or take whole weekend trips away from each other. It could be something as simple as having your own space in the house where you are expected to completely disconnect from each other, that you don't have to listen out for each other, that you can mentally cut yourself off from the other and be in your own little world. And at a given time later in the evening, come together, even in the same house. Get your own man cave. That's a really common thing. She shed, I guess, is the other one. Play hut. I don't know, whatever you want to call it, but your own designated space that allows you to separate and reunite on a daily basis or semi-daily basis. May not be able to do that every day. The third thing in this article was when they surprise me. And surprise has a great number of different things that they included. It could be when you reveal something about your past that your partner didn't know, or when you show them a skill that you have that you've never shown them before, when you express an opinion you never said before, or maybe an actual surprise party, or something about you that makes them question, do I really know who you are? Or recognizing that there's still more about you that I can learn. Can rekindle the passion when you recognize that there's still mystery to be found in you. You can kindle that in specific ways. You can also recognize that when you're establishing your relationship, that a relationship is not a deposition, that you don't have to tell them every little thing about you from beginning to end. Maybe keep some things in reserve to surprise them now and again. Nothing that would constitute keeping secrets, of course. But, you don't have to tell them everything, especially things that might hurt them and so forth and so on. So keep a little bit of surprise in the relationship and reveal that to them at an appropriate time. And the last thing that was in this article is when you see your partner through the eyes of another. And this is something that came up again and again when we were talking about couples in the pandemic, when they could no longer go out. It kind of killed their libido because there's a sexual charge that can come from seeing your partner being desired by another. Now, and when they say seeing through the eyes of another, it doesn't necessarily always mean desire. It could also be other aspects of them, someone who admires your partner's intelligence or their skills in another area of life. But oftentimes it really is just about the sexual desire creating a charge that sparks between the two of you. And this sort of eroticized charge that you can get if you are not made overly jealous by it can be harnessed and taken back into your bedroom. And it's often just the natural process of dating, going out in public together, recognizing that your partner is still sexy, even if in this moment your domesticity has lessened your attraction to your partner. Seeing your partner being desired by others is definitely, a major key to rekindling a relationship. And part of what I really enjoyed about this article and Mating in Captivity is somewhat of the philosophical ideas that, surround it. So one of the things that Esther Perel said in the book was many couples want to create almost complete fusion of the self between two people and mind melt and be there completely on top of each other all of the time. And she sees this as folly because all of desire is wanting to enter the life of another. But if your life and their life have become one, there's no way to desire entering into the life of another because you are in their life. You are completely united. And so holding a little space between you on a regular basis. And this article was talking about 4 major ways that you can do that. But just from the very intent of saying we are in each other's lives, we are not each other's lives, that we have separate lives that we share with one another, and allowing the other person to come into your life doesn't mean that they stay in your life and fuse with you. And the other point that she made in the book was eroticism for a lot of people, not necessarily gay men, but I know a lot of straight couples who have been fed a sort of traditional view of morality. Eroticism can bring up a lot of moral quandaries because a lot of sex and eroticism deals with power and transgression and submission, things that necessarily, in the realm of fantasy and danger and desire are acceptable, but in real life are taboo. In the world of fantasy and desire, we can live out aspects of ourselves that we don't in our regular lives. So it is often a cliche, but it can be true that powerful men enjoy being dominated by women because this is an aspect of themselves that they get to let go of in their private life, when in their job or even in just society in general, they are often put in positions of power and control. And there are times when they would like to relinquish that control and feel what it is like to let go. And in a sense, it's a fear that they get to experience in a controlled setting. So a lot of eroticism is much the same way. So for a lot of people, they can have sexual desires that are antithetical to their moral beliefs and to their standards, simply because it is their erotic imagination is a way for them to act out the transgressive and dangerous aspects of their life that can give them release for a short period of time in a controlled setting with someone who cares and is allowed to be safe in that way. But you can't really get there until you see these erotic desires as something positive. And a lot of people have been saddled with these negative beliefs about their desires as they're just thinking about negative things is in itself a sin. And it's really sad. We've talked about it a lot on the live stream. People who say had desires like incest fantasies or gangbang fantasies, or one woman had fantasies about being handicapped and has desires to see videos of people who are handicapped. And all of these things sort of gave them a great amount of shame, when in reality, as they describe them, especially women who notoriously can sometimes be non-orgasmic, they constantly talked about these fantasies easily giving them the ability to get off, like on command, just like think of this and boom, coming. And yet they see this as, a moral failing of their own, when in reality, it is a gift that not everyone has. Not everyone has a rich inner fantasy life. And so, that's a part of it in the relationship, making sure that you don't completely fuse with your partner, but that you also give your fantasies the allowance that they deserve, recognizing that they're transgressive and that they're performed in a safe space in your head or with a safe and willing partner. It's an interesting philosophy because I often talk about the dualism in the spiritual realm. And when I was reading this book, it often made me think about this, where a lot of Eastern religions would talk about two opposing forces who circled one another, but could never join. And that was symbolized a lot by like the yin yang symbol. And each of them were drawn by the piece of themselves that's in the other. But if they ever were to come together in union, they would basically annihilate one another. And so they're forever in this dance of trying to get as close to each other as possible without annihilating the other. And this is a basis of love in general, that it's a dance. You constantly find yourself moving toward one another and moving away from each other at the same time, so that you provide space and closeness. No, it's a great book. I definitely recommend it. If you want to hear more about our thoughts on Esther Perel's article, that'll be available in the live stream. I believe that's going to be on the 23rd, March 23rd, 2022 on YouTube and Facebook. It's going to be a great discussion. I'm recording this before the live stream. But yeah, Esther Perel, check out her podcast, Where Should We Begin? And of course, I'm going to provide a link to Mating in Captivity in the show notes. All right, I'll get to the next topic right after the short break. Hey, thank you for listening to the podcast thus far. And if you would like to support Male Media Mind in a more targeted way, become a patron of Male Media Mind. So on patreon.com/Male Media Mind, you can sign up for $5 a month to be an M3 VIP, and you'll get extra content at the end of each of our live streams. In addition, you'll have a say in how we spend the money for future events and projects coming out of M3. It's always great to see that people are supporting us directly, but if you want to do so indirectly, you can also purchase the book, Mating in Captivity. In the description of this podcast, I'm going to include a link for the Amazon affiliate program. If you buy the book, we get a small kickback with no extra cost to you. All right, now back to the rest of our conversation about making it work. So from the beginning of starting M3, I've always explored different relationship models. And I've always felt that monogamy should not be the default position for any sort of relationship. And in this episode, I've talked about the 10 questions you should ask yourself before having sex. I believe those questions are most suited for people who are in more casual relationships, such as friends with benefits, fuck buddy, pound pal, no strings attached type sexual relationships. And even those are relationships. So let's not get it twisted. A lot of people will say they're not ready for a relationship and they're actually in one. And the questions about how to get closer to your partner and the discussion of mating and captivity is for those who monogamy is their primary choice for a relationship in a long-term relationship. But not everyone is suited for monogamy. And consensual non-monogamy is a valid choice that people can make. But I've also recognized that there's been these opposing camps in the gay community about whether or not monogamy or non-monogamy is the better relationship model. And the truth is that both of them have issues. And I've talked about the issues of monogamy for a while. So I thought I would actually discuss some of the issues that may come up with consensual non-monogamy. There are some limitations that consensual non-monogamy faces. First, you just have to realize that everything in life has trade-offs. And so the first thing I had to think about was the communication that is necessary to make sure that your partner is okay with the situation is by far the biggest flaw of consensual non-monogamy. So in most situations, one person is going to be more interested in non-monogamy than the other. Even if both partners are oriented to being non-monogamous, one of them will probably be getting more sexual partners than the other. And one of them is going to feel a little left out. I think this is just generally speaking. Obviously, might not be the case in every time, but I've seen it happen more than a few times. And one of the things that is required for this sort of relationship model to work is constant renegotiation. Because what happens is, of course, you can have a idea of what it may feel like to know that your partner is out and about with someone else. It is another to actually experience it. And when you check in with them, are you actually willing to renegotiate the parameters of your relationship? Or is it hard line? If we can't be non-monogamous, we can't be together. Because I feel that if you make that hard line, it pressures the person who's uncomfortable with the situation to keep their mouth shut. And so I think it can make for a very lopsided relationship where one person is quite, content having the illusion of a happy relationship while the partner at home is miserable and the other is getting their rocks off all across town. It happens a few times. I've seen it more than a few times. And I've certainly experienced it myself where at least the idea of non-monogamy was interesting before it actually happened. I think a lot of times people, given the choice between blowing up their relationship for feeling distress that their partner is fucking around, they would rather just, keep their mouth shut and live with the discomfort. And truth be told, they could leave the relationship and find a more suitable relationship, but it is really tough to go sometimes because of what is good in the relationship. And I think the other side is also true for the person who is, I guess, the more open of the two. I mean, the fact is, I think a lot of people who entered into non-monogamous relationships want to have a sense of freedom that monogamy doesn't allow them to have. Just for some people, the idea of being in a monogamous relationship is confining and constricting. But for some of those non-monogamous couples, that offer of freedom is elusive because of the possibility that their partner would disagree with them. And if they have to make the negotiations constantly with their partner who is not as comfortable with their extra relationship encounters, is that really freedom? It's freedom with a asterisk. You have to have that little extra clause at the end, like, you're free, but you really aren't, because you do have a bond with your primary partner, and their feelings have to come first if you want to remain in that relationship. I think another one is obvious: jealousy. Jealousy in a monogamous relationship happens just as much as jealousy in a non-monogamous relationship. So let's be clear. Non-monogamy does not have the patent on jealousy. But I think the difference in jealousy in a monogamous relationship is that it can actually be a beautiful thing, in a sense, to feel jealousy in a closed relationship, because there isn't that actual threat there. It's an imagined threat. And the jealousy that one partner can have for another can actually bring them closer together. Whereas the jealousy in an open relationship may indicate that they're actually afraid that some of the sexual partners that they are engaging with are more satisfying to them than they are. And they very well may be right. I mean, that's kind of the reason why you would have an open relationship, is to seek out sexual encounters that are better than those that you could have with your primary partner. In fact, jealousy is flipped on its head, is no longer an indication that this is the person you want. It's an indication that your relationship is unstable. And so I think jealousy could mean different things in different situations, depending on what it is. Another issue that can come up in open relationships is shit can get messy. Let's be real. When you have sex with someone, if the sex is good, feelings may get involved. Feelings might get complicated. Your expectations of what you're going to get from that person may change over time, especially if you have repeated encounters with someone. The person outside of the relationship may be nutty and jealous and vengeful and spiteful, and could cause instability in a relationship that you're not ready to deal with. You could find yourself in an extra relationship with someone who is not kind, who is not understanding, who is psycho, quite frankly, or just a threat to your relationship. So that's the thing. And when feelings get hurt in the relationship, people say and do things out of anger and jealousy that, with more people involved, gets spread around. Like, that's the other thing. Like, people start gossiping about who's doing who and what's happening here and there. And the more shit that's going on, the more shit there is to talk about, the more shit people will talk about, So there's that to consider. It can get messy. I think another one is something really core to feeling special in a relationship. And that is, if you are spreading that dick all around town, the value of that dick is lowered when it gets home. It's like, I was going to call it dick inflation. If everyone has had that dick, is it really that special anymore? And let's be real. I guess in long-term relationships, it may become rote and boring. I think a lot of people feel that happens after a while, after a long-term monogamous sexual relationship. The dick gets boring anyway, but it's still special because it's yours. And whoever's had it before, they haven't had the person at this moment in their life. Like, everyone has a past, but like, if it's 12 different people in the past year who's had it before you did, it's, for some people, it can seem less valuable, and for good reason, because through the eyes of other people, it's not the same, These are all things that don't necessarily have to be an issue in long-term relationships. I think one of the things is to obviously have good rules for someone who is open, and to renegotiate those rules as often as possible. to not be afraid to bring up the difficult questions. Because if you're being honest and respectful when looking for extra relationship sex, it is possible to avoid some of these issues. But the problem I've had in a lot of these conversations with people is people get into their camps and believe that either consensual non-monogamy or monogamy are essentially better or worse than the other. And they're not. I think they're just different. And they're based on the proclivities of the people involved. So for all the things that I talked about here, I still believe in consensual non-monogamy. I think people should have a choice. And whether you end up in a monogamous relationship or not, there should be open communication as to what your expectations are in that relationship, what your needs are, what your true feelings are for people in and out of relationships. Are you comfortable with your partner having love feelings for other people, even if they're not engaging in full-blown relationships with them? What does jealousy look like to you, and how can your partner help you alleviate jealousy? Because I don't think that jealousy in the confines of a non-monogamous relationship is solely the issue of the person who is jealous, because your actions are causing the jealousy. I think you have a responsibility to try to mitigate that jealousy. And so in order for you to be able to do that, you actually have to talk to them and ask them, what can I do to help you mitigate this jealousy while still giving me the freedom that I am looking for in an open relationship? And that was where we also got on some of my earlier content dealing with open relationships, is that not all open relationships are the same. Some are monogamish, where you're mostly monogamous, but you have special guest stars very seldomly in your relationship. Very few people who come in and out of your relationship, and they are a special treat, a special seasoning to your very active, vibrant sex life within your relationship. And the point of these guest stars is to add an element of danger and mystery and even a little bit of conflict. The fear that your partner might leave or find someone else more attractive can be part of what sparks the sexual desire in a monogamous or mostly monogamous relationship. So that's one possibility, because as we were talking with the Esther Perel's Mating in Captivity, what can cause the eroticism in a long-term relationship to wane is the very safety that you were craving out of monogamy. So like if you've been in a relationship with someone for like 10 years and you are 100% certain that no matter what you did, they would not leave you, that could actually kill your sex drive, because there's no danger. Danger is an essential part of the spark of lust. There was this study years ago of these experimenters who were on a bridge, and they had like a questionnaire that they would hand the experimenters. Like people would be crossing a bridge. One was a wobbly bridge, like a rope bridge, and one was a sturdy wooden bridge. And the wobbly bridge, even though the two people were taking the same examination, they were filling out a questionnaire. The questionnaire within it had a indicator of how attracted to the person administering the test was. The test was designed to figure out how much the person desired them, even though that's not what they said the test was about. And what they found was that the people on the wobbly bridge found the experimenter on average more attractive because of the slight uneasiness of being on a wobbly bridge. A little bit of danger increases attraction. It's very strange psychological tendency, but it's true. So an added amount of danger in your relationship possibly could rekindle the passion within a mostly monogamous relationship. On the other hand, you could have a situation where the doors are wide open to the point where your relationships to other people outside of your primary relationship take up more time and energy than the energy that you put into your primary relationship. Like you could end up just being roommates while you're kind of living a single life, and who knows, that could be the kind of relationship you're looking for. I mean, some people I've seen who are roommates for a very long time. I assume that roommates is quotation marks. They're really in a relationship, but it's just like a super open relationship, but they have basically a partnership type relationship where it's almost completely non-sexual, but it's still a relationship and they're not leaving each other. So whatever works for you. And it would not be helpful to, I guess, judge either of these relationship models as something that should be the way that you structure your relationship. I mean, at the end of the day, you just need to figure out what is going to work for you and do that. All right. So I really did enjoy this episode. I didn't expect to go into this direction. I really did get a lot out of our live stream on Wednesday, March 23rd. You can go back and watch some of the responses that Jeff and Greg gave on the 10 questions and the one on mating in captivity with Esther Perel. It's a really fascinating topics. I don't know. I've always enjoyed discussing relationships and different relationship models. If you enjoyed this conversation, please make sure to join me on social media. I always like to pose relationship questions there as well. You can message me on social media. It's at Male Media Mind across the board. And I will get back to you as soon as possible and maybe use some of your questions as topics in our live stream or the podcast. Again, thank you for listening, and I will catch you in the next episode.